My name is Damien Mander, the founder and CEO of the International Anti-Poaching Foundation. We're a wildlife conservation direct action organisation that's focusing its efforts in Southern and East Africa. I've been over here in America generating awareness about the issue over there on the ground and also trying to rally some support for the rangers that are out there on the front lines trying to defend wildlife. I was out in Africa. I mean, I initially went there not to become involved in any long-term projects, but out there for adventure and seeing what was happening to animals and the hard work of the rangers changed all of that. In particular, a buffalo that we saw one day that had its back leg caught in a wire snare. The rangers who can look at the ground and understand the different marks there the same way you understand the front page of the newspaper, they said she'd been there for 3 days struggling to get that leg free, and she'd struggled so hard that she'd actually ripped her pelvis in half. And I'll never forget the look on that animal's eye, an animal that any other time you don't want to be that close to it in the bush. And that animal, there was just like a pleading nature in her eye to put her out of that misery. And we did that. We put a gun to her head and we pulled the trigger. And at that time she gave birth to a stillborn calf. And that was me reaching a moral baseline of what I was not willing to walk away from, and that actually was a main catalyst for setting up the International Anti-Poaching Foundation back in 2009, and designed not to do a lot of things, designed just to go to the front lines of these wars and be the last line of defence for animals like that buffalo. So at the moment we're trying to raise funds for a handful of key projects, one being the protection of the world's largest rhino population on the border of South Africa's Kruger National Park in Mozambique. We need to raise almost $1 million a year for that. A special investigations unit which is actually going after the people that are involved with these organised crime syndicates. We need to raise $150,000 for that. We have a new anti-poaching unit that's starting up in Zimbabwe, and that's costing us around $150,000 also. It's a very exciting new project. We're going to have more information for you shortly on that. One of the new projects that we are focusing on also is the Anti-Poaching Ranger College. So this is going to be focusing on teaching the instructors of tomorrow, the new generation of conservation's leaders. And this is going to cost us around $650,000 a year, but it goes to the core of the biggest issue we have in the conservation industry, and that is adequate leadership that's out there ready to command and control these anti-poaching operations on the front line. And that's what's important to us. It's not just about the elephant and the rhino that are being poached, but everything else that is also being targeted, whether it's for bushmeat or some form of commercial trade, or whether it's for its skins. We need to have rangers out there on the front lines willing to stand between those animals and the poachers that are coming to kill them. At the moment around the world, less than 5% of philanthropic funding goes to environmental causes and animals, both domestic and wildlife. And if we can't figure out a way as a species, as a generation, how we can equal out that balance, that we are seriously going to be looking at the demise or the extinction in the wild of iconic animals that have hardly evolved for millions of years, animals like elephant and rhinoceros, and that's not something I want to be responsible for. It's not a conversation I want to have with my now 4-year-old son as to why these animals don't exist in the wild anymore, and I'm not willing to let it happen. We need to get behind this as an international community and stop being so focused on ourselves. We spend billions of dollars each year on healthcare and furthering our own advancement as a single species. We're one of 5 million species on this planet. We're the only species that has the power to determine what level of suffering and extinction is acceptable for everything else. We just need to balance it out a bit. The flow-on effect, if these animals go extinct, is catastrophic for the communities that border what are now these wilderness areas. When the elephants and the rhinos go, these two key species, the tourists stop coming, and when the tourists stop coming, the funding stops coming in for the anti-poaching unit. And when that stops, the communities move in and they start poaching all the rest of the other animals that are there. The fences come down, the trees get chopped, the water stops flowing, we have desertification. This is not something we can afford to have any more of. We've got some big issues on this planet. Human population growth, deforestation, climate change. These are things that we know we can do something now, but we're not going to see the effects for maybe 20 or 30 years. The most important and most immediate thing we can do right now is to hold on to what we have left. And that is why protecting these particular keystone species and the rangers that support them is so critical, not only for their survival, but ours as a species. The people we're dealing with, they're not poachers, they're criminals. They're people, syndicates that are involved with organised crime, child prostitution, guns, drugs, human trafficking. The illegal trafficking of wildlife is the 4th largest criminal industry in the world. Okay, it's a huge source of funds, and these rhinos, these elephants are just another source of dollar signs running around for these people to get their hands on. Not only that, but what we're seeing now is an increasing amount of links into terror networks. Terror networks are using wildlife crime to get their hands on more funding for the missions that they undertake. So, I mean, this is not just critical for the survival of animals, but national and global security as well. If we can't do our job on the front lines, and the flow-on effect into the Western world are going to be seen increasingly with time, as we see more and more money going to organised crime and more money going to terrorism. This is another source of funding for these terror networks, and we need to get on top of it. We need to stop it at the source, and the source is in Africa. One of the ways that you can get involved is to find organisations that are involved. Over and Above Africa is an organisation that rallies support around the world and drives that to key areas on the ground through organisations like ourselves, who actually run and manage the rangers that are out there right now. As you and me sit here and have this conversation, they're out there risking their life. We really appreciate any support. The biggest mistake we can make is to think that our contribution, no matter how big or small, doesn't make a difference. It's the accumulative efforts of people around the world that add up and create the groundswell we need to be able to do what we do out there on the front lines. We don't ask people around the world to pick up an AK-47 and come and live in these dark, hostile, dangerous conditions. We'll do that for you, but what we do need is this extended family around the world that understands these are not African animals. These are everybody's. It's a global community's responsibility for us all to look after. So thank you very much.